Welcome, everybody. I'm Rick DiClemente with another episode of Astrology Unplugged. And as you know, if you've been a regular watching this on YouTube, most of the time it's about astrology and related items. However, tonight is the third time we're going to visit this topic, and it is astrological too, of the rise of the divine feminine. And I'll make it short. Tonight we have three guests with us. During the last several years, I've been unable to figure out what's happening because there's been sometimes planets are active while others are active, and it's very hard to figure out what planet is what. When you've been doing astrology a long time, you can sense that's Mars, that's Uranus, that's Neptune. You can feel it. And what's happened, and I suspected it for the last 5-6 years, is this new planet Eris, E-R-I-S, which is really a dwarf planet out beyond Pluto. She takes 540 years to go around the circle. She has appeared on the scene what appears to be at the absolute worst possible time, but knowing Eris, she has appeared at the exact right time. She is a planet of discord, and she's not just discord. She has a lot to do with fairness. She can't stand people getting over on others or taking advantage of others or achieving a reputation unduly. There's a lot about Eris, and it's a lot of in the Mr. Trump's chart. He has a very strong Eris. Eris has been in the sign of Aries for 120 years. No, Eris will be in Aries for 120 years. It entered Aries in 1920. So only people near 100 years of age have Eris other than Aries. A few people near 100 have Eris in Pisces. Anyhow, it's not just a planet of discord. The mythology is great and thick. She's growing. She has a lot to do with Pluto. She's very similar to Pluto, yet different. I'm going to let the experts handle this because I'm really relatively new to Eris. I'm studying her. So tonight we're going to be talking about Eris, and we're going to be talking about the women's rise, the Me Too movement, and the rise of the divine feminine, and the hopeful decline or stepping into the background of the matriarch. So my guests are tonight three. The third one, Melody Whinnery from California, will be joining us at 8:25. Alicia Fronczek and I have gone way back to 2003 when we worked together at a local New Age shop. She's a Pittsburgher. She's now coming to you tonight from New Orleans. She is a healer of all types, and she knows a lot about the feminine energy. And I'm sure she knows her handful of astrology, too. Also tonight is my guest, Linda Platt, who's a wonderful, wonderful astrology student, a professor of English at La Roche College here in Pittsburgh. And she has really been sucking it up and really devouring what this Eris archetype is like. So I'm going to lay it aside and let these two ladies take over. We're not going to have any form to it. I may guide you and have a few questions along the way, but I'm going to let you take it where you want to take it. And Alicia, I'm going to start with you. And I want to point out to people that you and I have been friends, but we've not been in close contact for a long time. And in the last month, as I was forming this group, I was looking for a fourth woman. The fourth woman had to scheduling difficulties. I was looking for another woman, and you came in of nowhere with an email to me saying, "Hey, Rick, how you doing? How'd you like to talk about this?" So what's on your mind? What's been going on with you and the women in New Orleans?
Yeah, well, thanks. I guess I should start also by saying I am not an astrologer. That is one of the things that I do moon medicine circles, and I host this, and I talk about a lot of these ideas because I really am drawn to the ways that this whole cosmic collection of dancing and planets and stars and angles and galaxies. I mean, I don't need to tell you guys, right? We're all connected. But this information I feel comes to me from very intuitive and also collective, like cultural ways as well. And so I am also here to learn a lot more about what you guys are seeing with Eris in the sky and how this is playing out in charts and stuff. This is a really interesting topic, and I'm really excited to be able to participate. But for me, I do a lot of healing work as a spiritual guide, mentor, coach, intuitive, energy medicine practitioner with a lot of my clients are women. And I do work a lot with men as well, but a lot of my clients are women, and a lot of them are either coming from extreme or versions of trauma that they've experienced in their life and are healing from that trauma and the traumatic ways that has affected their physical body, mental, emotional spaces, living with PTSD, those kinds of experiences. And then how that often brings about a spiritual awakening, because what I see over and over again is that these women are the women that are being suppressed in this world have actually so much light. And that trauma and that oppression and the abuse is actually very much part of the systemic patriarchal ways of holding women in place and stifling the light themselves. And then the other group of women that I work with, a lot of women and men, but mostly women, are those that are healers and light workers and those that are teachers and people that are holding this front line for this new wave of what's coming next, and being able to kind of be out there on the forefront of how we're going, because we all need to be taken care of, and we also need to up our skills. What I'm seeing out there now collectively, and this fall of the patriarchy, rise of the divine feminine has been happening for a while now. It got seeded actually. We've been waiting for it to come for a while. And I guess I'm talking a lot, and I want to make sure I give it.
That's okay. Don't you worry. You're going to get plenty of opportunity.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so I'm seeing that this new rise is, to me, looking like it's right on time. That the whole, ways that we're seeing this out in the world is, I feel like it's finally hit the collective consciousness in a way that's reached the tipping point. So
to give you a briefing on this. About 2003, Mike Brown and his astronomers in New Mexico discovered 80 new planets in a belt called the Kuiper Belt, Kuiper, and they're small planets, non-planets, dwarf planets, and you get into the definition of what a planet is and all. But anyhow, that's one of the reasons by 2006 they had to either add 80 new planets or demote Pluto. Anyhow, there are 4 of them. Maki is one, Hame is another. So there are 4 major ones. And the first one that's really making a big appearance is Eris. We're going to talk much more. I'm glad to see that Melody has been able to join us earlier than she thought. I want to go now. Welcome, Melody. I'm going to unmute you, and I'm going to go to Linda Platt. Linda, I'm so glad that you have joined us. I'm going to let you 3 mostly manage the evening, because this may take many weeks. This may not just be 1 week. This is a big deal. As my girlfriend calls it, epochal. You don't use that word every day. Epochal. It's an epic. Take it, Linda. You're a really, really excellent student. I'm really interested in your Libra view of society and what's happening. And I know you got a lot of Scorpio in you too. So how do you mix it all up?
Well, I mean, one of the things is that I sort of want to go back to what you talked about the discovery of Eris. But to answer that question, one of the things that the more I write about it, the more I'm absolutely convinced, as are other people, that Eris rules Libra. I mean, it's just so, there's just so many boxes you can tick off, and we can talk about that later. I think it's really important to think about that the discovery of the planet, because in looking into Eris, one of the things I recalled was something you taught us when we talked about Chiron, which is when you discover a heavenly body, there's this very long process of determining, what it means. And if you go back to Tarnus, and if you look at, was it Cosmos and Psyche, is that the one where he really talks about like looking back 200 or 300 years to different conjunctions and squares and so on, you have to have that span of time to really understand what's going on.
She's referring to one of the great astrologers, American philosopher, Richard Tarnas, who wrote Cosmos and Psyche, and it took him 30 years to write it. And what she's saying is these new planets come on, they come on because we're ready for them.
Right. Exactly.
Pluto never appeared before 1930. Pluto didn't exist till 1930. Of course it did, but it didn't exist astrologically until people's minds were ready to open up that Pluto avenue. That's what she's speaking about with Eris. Go ahead.
Well, and with Eris and the, when Eris is accepted as a body in discovered, and then in 2006, when the astronomers meet to talk about this, they do this demotion of Pluto to a dwarf planet and upset all kinds of things. So one of the things we can say is from the beginning, Eris is disrupting our known universe.
That's right.
But the other thing about it is think about it this way. There's these 80 planets or dwarf planets in the Kuiper Belt. And there's now 8 planets that we think of as regular planets, plus Pluto, plus now Eris. And where Eris and Pluto stand now is in this belt that's the edge now of our known universe.
Between Saturn and Uranus.
Right, exactly. So we're out there in.
No, I'm sorry. I'm confusing you.
Uranus
with Chiron. Go ahead.
Right, okay.
Beyond Pluto. Go ahead.
But we're beyond Pluto, and we're at the edge of the known universe. And so Eris, I think, represents the opening up of consciousness. Where we are ready now to start absorbing our place in the universe in a different way, at a different level. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, all this disruption that occurs because of it, because we have to go beyond what we have understood to this point, and we have to start thinking in other ways. The other thing about Eris that I think is important in terms of the discovery was how long and difficult it was to name Eris, and how confusing it is even yet, because the discoverers were calling her Xena. And they knew that was a temporary name, but after the warrior princess. So we already had this female warrior archetype that Eric Francis calls postmodern. So we're looking at a different kind of story, a different way of thinking about things. And she, of course, Xena is often associated with the feminine in terms of sexuality, in terms of sort of being an Amazonian figure, if you will. Mm-hmm. But when there was a lot of talk about naming her Persephone, but there's already an asteroid named Persephone, so they couldn't do that. But Persephone is interesting because of the myth of Persephone is about a woman who's kidnapped into the underworld. Mm-hmm. And her mother and her father are fighting over her. Her mother and her lover, her kidnapper, are fighting over her. Is she going to stay in the underworld, or is she going to come back to the other world? And they finally just decide to divide her time. And she has no choice in that. Persephone has no choice in that. She's going to be down here, she's going to be up there, and they're going to come to this agreement. And then we have Eris. Okay, so we can't name her Persephone. We can't name her after a story where the woman has no choice. So we get Eris, and Eris is Eris A and Eris B, but the one that most of us think of is the one who's the daughter of Zeus and Hera, sister of Ares, Mars, sister of Mars, and I'm thinking the Greek name for the god. I'm in my mythological brain, not in my astrological brain. And she's the one that rolls the golden apple into the party that she's not been invited to. Well, I mean, oh my goodness, that evokes Eve and the apple, and what happens when a woman takes an apple and gives it somewhere. So that's a nod back to very old stories about how women are trouble. Women are trouble. And
well, isn't that interesting?
you know, and so when we think about this, the other Eris, because there's a second one, is in the Zane Stein article, he calls her Eris B, but she's the Eris that is about healthy competition. She's very Libran. Mm-hmm. So, and one of the things that some people have postulated is that that's two sides of the same coin. On the one hand, competition with people because you've been excluded, where you're trying to break into something. And on the other hand, a competition where the playing field is level, where everybody's playing the same game and everybody's.
That's why Eris is all about fairness.
Right, exactly. So I think that's part of it. I'm just giving a little history there, and we can go on to talk to other things. But Eris was discovered in the same year as Hurricane Katrina. And I don't think that's accidental either, because Katrina, of course, is a female named hurricane, and up to this Hurricane Michael is probably the worst natural disaster on the continent. And we all remember, those of us who are alive, I assume that's almost all of us, remember vividly how upsetting that was. But that was all about the left out people. The people who got stuck in New Orleans and couldn't get out, that didn't have money, that didn't have transportation, that were afraid to leave because their homes would be looted, or they were too sick, or they couldn't leave their pets, or they couldn't leave their aging mother. And so they're being airlifted off roofs and they're dying in their homes and so on. And so I think that for me, that's a really pivotal way to begin thinking about Eris, because what that says to me, when you look at those sort of years of discovery, because I looked at everything that happened in 2005, but that was the one that rang the chimes for me, because what I think that says is it is indeed about fairness, but it's also about how we are either one or we're nothing. You know, once we cross over from the known universe now, where we can all be sort of separate little clots of humanity, and we sort of move into this new way of thinking, we can't allow people to be left on roofs to drown. You know, we're not going to be able to do that. And I find it very interesting that we're talking about this now.
Well, I want to bring that up more. And remember also, we have a president who's using the word unfair and fair every other sentence. He's talking about people being fair. That's not fair. This is fair. That's not fair. Not treated fairly, treated fairly, which is something brand new. Thank you, Linda. I'm going to move on to Melody here in a second, but I want to point out something because there's so much here. It's so rich. I want to point out something to you to show you how epochal this is. In the 1700s, we discovered one planet, Uranus, that brought us into the age of Industrial Revolution, very Uranian. In the 1800s, we discovered one planet, Neptune, which brought about the spiritualist, spiritual thinking, transcendentalist. In the 1900s, we found two planets, Pluto, which brought Hitler, atomic weapons, atomic energy, hide under your desk, the unconscious. In 1977, Chiron, which brought about the healers, the new healing modalities. Now, in the early part of the 2000s, we found 80. So what that tells you is the phenomenal growth between those 3 centuries, and the growth is going on like this in terms of mental capacity. Now that we're getting free of the church, we're getting free of what daddy wants, we're getting freer from the sexual revolution of the 60s. We're now opened up to where it may not be very stable, but we're now capable of handling all these new energies. So anyhow, I want to get back to both of you so much, but I do want to go to Melody, and thank you for hustling to get on the air with us. I know you've been studying her a lot, and I'm really anxious to see how you 3 ladies mix this up. And I'm going to start by asking you, Melody, explain to us about the party if she wasn't invited in the apple.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rick. I apologize for being late, especially to Alicia. Especially, I want to apologize to Alicia because I've already missed what she said, so I apologize if I step all over something she said. The wedding that Eris did not get invited to was a wedding of mortals, but she was the only god not invited, so that's how she felt left out. All the other gods were invited. There was a prophecy about the son of this marriage that he would overthrow his father, so none of the gods wanted to be the one marrying this mortal woman, because of course they did that quite frequently. And so it was an arranged marriage to kind of control by this group, control the prophecy so it wouldn't overthrow anybody else that they didn't want overthrown. And Eris, I think, represents that part of us that does not want to be bound, does not want to be controlled. And she was left out for a reason. Maybe she's the kind who would just speak up and drop that verbal bomb that would get everybody uncomfortable. And, oh, right, this is an arranged marriage. Oh, maybe Thetis isn't really happy about this whole thing. And what I love is she's still not stopped by that. She isn't bound, and she knows it, even if everybody wants to. It's very, like Susan said, very it's very Libran, that you can put all these socially pretty rules and I can still do whatever I want. And
do you know why she was not invited?
I really think she would have caused, I haven't seen anything that says why. I think she wasn't invited because she would have brought out to the fore that this wasn't.
I see.
This wasn't appropriate.
Well, if you look at any list of keywords, the number one keyword is lawless.
Yeah, she's gonna.
And Lucy Lawless is the one who plays. Lucy Lawless is the one who plays Xena.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so where did the apple come in? What's the significance of the apple, the golden apple that she throws into the party?
It's from the tree of the Hesperides. I know it came, and the Hesperides were part of one of the Eris's family tree. I don't remember at the moment which part of the family tree, but that tree was cared for by them, and so she had easy access. And what I think is really kind of stick it to your own people is she threw it in there to cause trouble with the women and to stir up the women and to get the women all riled up and doing something, and then to put the men in the position of having to deal with this conflict, and none of them wanted to deal with it. So it kind of took the core matter of, do you not recognize that you're playing this game back and forth, that these social rules aren't serving either one of you? You're both bound to each other, and don't you want to be free and independent? We can still recognize each other's sacredness and not have to play these games. And so she kind of blew it up with that apple.
Well, it's so interesting that she would be associated with Libra, because Libra is the sign associated with social order.
Yes.
But Libras are also good at throwing the invisible bomb.
Yes.
They can do that.
That is true. That is true.
I just know that from internally.
I also found in the naming that was mentioned earlier, I found several other names for her that different people used. She's associated as if she's not any different from someone called Enyo, who is very much considered the consort or sister of Mars. And in the Latin, she's Discordia, obviously the goddess of discord. But that was also really helpful to me in just understanding dis and cord means breaking of the hearts. You're disassociating hearts. The hearts are not beating together. We are in disharmony. Let's at least acknowledge that and start there.
Alicia, what are you hearing?
I'm grateful that there's a lot of information out there about this, and I think that one of the things that whenever you were touching on the Melody, when you were touching on the the apple being thrown in, and again it was about like causing chaos within the amongst the women, the female goddesses, but that the question, the apple was rolled in with the question that, or the expectation that this was for the fairest, that only the fairest would get the apple. And that to have all of the goddesses clamoring over who was the fairest, it really cuts to the vanity, but also that idea of value being placed on our appearance, or the idea of a role of the feminine as being fair, that was deemed a reward in some way. And that's something that we see now, that the way women are holding themselves collectively, like through this patriarchal, again, lineage, that is the way we are to be seen, to be valued, that our worthiness is determined by, our beauty, our body, the ways that we're presented to the world, and not on, like Athena was in this struggle, and she's like, why would she be ducking for that apple and hoping to be the fairest, right? She's strong and fierce. And I think that's kind of like when we're looking at the fall of the patriarchy, for instance, this very small ethical thing that you're talking about, like this is really what's on the table right now. And I really see it coming, like this is the beginning of the structure being pulled apart and the cords being ripped out. That, is another way to like think about discord, but that it's like, when women start to redefine themselves differently, we have to find a different way that we are sourcing our power. And it's not coming from the outer sources anymore. And this is something that I've been seeing collectively. I've been talking about this a lot in the moon circles that I've been doing, looking at the eclipse energy that's been happening on a galactic level. When we're looking at energies, right, the energy body, in the ways that we're identifying the collective thing that's been happening. And it's just like, it's blowing my mind, the awarenesses that people are having around this. But it's like, when we are existing in this three-dimensional world about my source of power is related to this other person, and my value is related to the outer world in some way, then we have automatically entered into this codependent relationship with the outer world. And whenever what we're being called to do, I think collectively, particularly over this last 2008 cycle, right, is to go up into source energy and go up into our own high self and our own divine feminine, divine masculine, divine binary, non-binary gender, like, blow it all up, right? But come down into our own source, so that we're no longer defining ourselves based on the collective power structures that have held us there, whether it's patriarchy or white supremacy, or like all of these other ways that we are holding our power structures. And that when Eris comes in, it's like, again, that apple blows it all up, because now it's looking at your weakness, and your weakness is what's the perceptions that we need to be holding ourselves to a standard that's actually keeping us entrapped and enslaved in the first place.
Well, that's perfectly said. And if you want a real education, think of all the things in the world that are beautiful. Go into Google and type the word beauty. You will see thousands and thousands of pages of women dressed up, women with makeup. No pastoral scenes, no snowbound scenes, trees, rivers, beauty, beauty, beauty. That's the whole idea. The thing I wanted to say before we move on here is, what I'm hearing is that there is an element of Eris that's like Uranus. Because what I'm hearing is Eris has an element of, I'm not going to play games and put up a face for you. I'm going to be myself, which is so non-Libran, which is really shocking. And Uranus is that way. Uranus will never put up a face for anybody. So it's kind of shocking. Do you see that, Linda?
Well, I think so. And it's one of the things that's frustrating, because we're so new with Eris, is that we're really tied to the mythology in a way that we have escaped the original mythologies of Mars. And, we don't think about the stories about them. We just understand that as an energy. And so everything, when I read things and they talk about Eris's discord and she was mean as a goddess or whatever, it's just, that seems so off base to me, because it's what I think it is that when people are real and they go into a situation that's not real, where you're having a wedding and it's all arranged and it's all controlled and everybody's got their, their false mask on and their persona, and they don't want her there because she's not that. She's that is actual discord. When the world is fake and you're real, you're upsetting the apple cart. And that's, when we think about what discord is, or the apple of discord, or whatever we want to call it. And I think Alicia's explanation of that, or was it Melody? Whoever said about the quartz, it was Melody.
Alicia.
Yeah, it was good, really, really, really interesting. But I keep thinking of the illustration on Eric Francis's website in one article about Eris, where she's holding the apple of discord. She's not discord. It's this other thing. And she can throw it to them, but they don't have to pick it up. They don't have to pick up the apple. They don't have to fight with each other. Aphrodite doesn't have to make a deal with Paris and end up giving him Helen and starting the Trojan War. She did none of that. What she did was put the apple there, and they could either pick it up or not.
I like that, Linda, in that it's really a reverse of it's a real reversal of the Garden of Eden myth.
Exactly.
She puts the woman puts the apple out there, and everybody else in the patriarchy starts this whole big thing. Every single one responsible for their reaction to the apple. They're all blaming her for throwing it in the first place.
We can't have that now. Let's think about this.
And I think that's also...
We've had it good for a long time. Go ahead.
It speaks again also to even just the idea that a goddess that would be speaking her mind, or that has, truth to say and won't wear a mask, that in some way that there is, that even in the mythological sense, in the discussions that we're having, it's trying to find the goodness in that, or that it's hard, she's been categorized as this other, in some way, where really this dark feminine goddess is the source of creative change in so many ways in the world. The dark feminine, the dark mother, the solar feminine. And I think that that's another way to think about this too. And this is what I think is so interesting. It's so fascinating for me to find out, because again, my background is not in astrology. It's something that I use as a tool, and it's definitely part of our moon circle discussions that I do. But at the same time, when I'm doing this work, a lot of the information that I had came intuitively, and it came through energy work and things like that. And so around the time that this planet was discovered was when I was seeing a lot of channels and a lot of people opening up to oh my gosh, the solar feminine is coming through. And I actually did a lot of work with Carol Chaco back in the day around this, and did some goddess activations. And I was able to also become a channel for a really intense energy healing called this goddess activation. And I was like, what is this? I had no idea. We're supposed to activate the solar feminine. It was very clear, the solar feminine. And so looking at the construct between solar feminine and lunar feminine, solar masculine and lunar masculine, that we actually have 4 archetypes and not just divine masculine and divine feminine. And so when you're looking at the classic lunar feminine, it is the nurturer, the intuitive, the wise one, the receptive energy, right? The nurse, the caregiver. But the solar feminine, that is the one that is out there, the creative force. It's the fiery goddess. It's Kali. It's all of this ways that it's all of those goddesses that really hold and embody the dark feminine, and see that in a way that we start to recognize. If we could see all solar feminine, solar masculine, lunar masculine, all in balance, all 4 in one grid, and not just a binary, that all of those elements are there. And when they're in balance, then they're all bringing us beautiful things.
Alicia, when you were working with all these women during these times, the last decade, how did you see the Eris emanate? How did you see Eris starting to come in and take over during the time it was so Plutonian and so Uranian? How did you sense it start to separate?
a lot of this stuff that happens is you see the work happening on the energy body, and then it starts to come into the physical. I mean, that's the way, you know, a lot of this works, right? We do the work outside, and then matter comes into form through the non-physical. And so whether that's awarenesses that they would have about certain relationships, letting go of relationship dynamics that were not serving them, or relationship dynamics that were even like really directly related to their roles as women. Women, we all have inherited the mother wound, and this is, you know, an ancestral thing that we're carrying. And when we can bring in these activations to help heal the mother line through ancestral work and through this other energy work, then we're tapping into generations and thousands of years worth of things that are stored in our cells and our bodies. And so once that does start to fall away, it's about an ownership of power, like with a capital P. Women have not been allowed to step into power because it's been, or rather we haven't done it the right way. And a lot of times, like when you're looking at this again, like on a timeline, you know, women fighting for the right to vote, but also not for the Black women. Women fighting for their way into the workplace, but the way I'm going to get into the workplace is by acting and behaving like a man. I'm going to prove that I can be just like the men, and I'm going to show up and I'm going to work the way a man does. And that's not the way a woman works. Mm-hmm. And when a woman was allowed to start entering the creative workforce from a solar feminine perspective and abandoning trying to try on the masculine role, then we started to really sink into a lot more change and diversity. And I think that where we need to go with this and keep going with this is owning power in a true way, so that it's not fighting for equality for women, that it's actually fighting for women's liberation. The liberation of the divine feminine means that a woman can stand in her power and hold that without having to equate it to any other standard, and without having to be held with any structure or format and expected to live up to whatever mask somebody else, society, believes that they should have. But a woman can stand in her own full, righteous, like divine sovereignty, you know, as a woman, and be valued just as much as any other aspect of presentation. Yeah, that's a long story about that, but I'm feeling pretty, I don't know if I even answered your question. Did I? Seeing how it works in the real world?
I think you're right on track. Linda?
Well, when Alicia was talking, I had just a minute ago looked at some notes that I had, and you know, in my, you know, when you sent me, when I asked for Zane Stein and you sent me to Eric Francis, and I thought, what's going on here? But it's never wrong. It's always right when you send me to the wrong thing in my mind. And one of the things he talked about when we go back to the Xena archetype, the lawless piece is interesting, but it's also, when he talks about the show being postmodern, he talks about how it's sort of not bound in time or space. Like Xena one week will be in the Greek era, and the next week she'll be with Egyptians, and the next week she's with some space alien. I mean, the storyline doesn't have any coherence to it. It's postmodern. It challenges the notions of time and space. And one of the things, and when I think about this, I think that's part of what has to happen. I'm sorry if you can hear sirens. They're everywhere around me. Is that we're at a place where so many things that we have taken for granted about what it means to be a human, you know, what it means to be alive on this planet, are open for question. You know, what is time? What is space? What is the planet? And what is our role on it? Because we're screwing the pooch on that one pretty directly. And the only thing that might save us is this notion that there has to be a different way to live as a human. And when I hear Alicia talking about that, it seems to me that freeing ourselves from a lot of these notions of, let's say, for example, capitalism. I don't have any problem with getting paid, so I'm not being political when I say that. What I'm saying is that we think of these as rigid givens, that we can't live without fossil fuels, we can't live without capitalism, we can't live without eating animals, we can't live without destroying and paving and, you know, doing, you know, wasting water and all the cutting down the forest. We think we can't live without that, but we have to live without that, or we're not going to live. So this question now becomes, I don't know where this is coming from. I'm not saying this, somebody else is saying this. Becomes a question of survival of our species, and it may be we're at the end, maybe we're at the end of it, but it also may be we're at an awakening where we can save ourselves and our cohabitants of the planet and make a new turn. And that would be my happy optimist piece of it. I think that's really I think that's why we're out on the edge of the solar system as we understand it, because we don't know what's beyond it, but we have to sort of push to that frontier because we have to save ourselves.
Definitely. Melody?
Well, I liked about the power. I think Eris, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but Eris looks at the game that all the goddesses were playing. In real life, it's the power that's been delegated to women, the roles that they get to fulfill, all the traits that none of the masculine gods wanted to take were assigned to goddesses, who took them and then could rationalize, well, because I'm the goddess of this, I'm also going to take this, and they're fighting for every piece they can get, instead of Eris standing there going, well, I'm just as good as everybody else. I have all of these things, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to defy all definition. I'm going to defy all boundaries. I'm going to show you there's much more out here than the little tiny pieces you've been given, and let's do something with it. And so throwing to the fairest is, I liked Alicia's question of why was Athena even in the battle in the first place? Well, because she saw the battle. She jumped in because she saw the battle, and she's the goddess of strategy. And so while she may not have been completely conscious of why she was engaging, I think it was still a very, very real to her that there was something valuable to be fought for there.
Well, and here's the other piece. What does to the fairest mean anyway?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What does it mean anyway? Why? Everybody always, because the myth goes on to talk about how beautiful the goddesses are and all that thing we talked about before, and that takes us down the line to Helen of Troy and the whole Trojan War. But the question is, what does it mean to be the fairest? The word fair does not necessarily mean physical beauty. Who is the fairest person? Who's fair? I'm just throwing
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
And we're also having the conversation, I guess, as we're talking about this edge of the universe, which I really love that analogy, Linda. I think that really is right on when it comes to this. But I feel like even like on some level, because the structures that are being asked to be demolished right now, I mean, like you said, we're on the edge of a new world awakening, and it is capitalism, and it is white male patriarchy that absolutely is at the forefront of this, because this system is designed on power. It's not hate crimes that are causing hate crimes. It's not hate. It's the power that people are not willing to relinquish that are causing that. And so we're clinging so tightly to these ways that the final death throes of these things. But I think that if we can even look at or step beyond what does happen when the patriarchy falls, and we actually do realize that it's time to connect again with the earth and living in these other ways that matriarchal societies really have always supported. But if we can bring something like that down, what we're doing is describing Eris even through the mythology of a patriarchal system. And so she herself has been defined by patriarchy already. And we're just kind of even tapping into what that message was. What if what this is really on the edge, on the frontier? And if we just even went to the most basic, far out, the furthest place that we could take what chaos means, that everything dissolves. And that means us as well. Our identities and the ways that we hold ourselves in the world have to be completely restructured and reevaluated. Every single one of us has some version of power that we hold on to, has some version of identity that we hold on to that keeps us feeling safe and secure and connected. And every single one of us has some version of that power that has been given to us through a system that is not something that we can hold on to anymore. And if we're willing to let that go then we also all have to step forward and be willing to just kind of like.
It coincides with Pluto so well. Now, did not we get the right for women to vote in 1920?
Right, exactly.
Pluto and Eris entered Aries in 1921. That's not a coincidence.
There you go.
She started a whole new zodiac after 540 years. She stepped in around 1921. So what are you people seeing beside the Me Too movement? What are you seeing out in society now that is symbolic of her emergence?
Transgender people.
I was going to say the same, yeah.
Huge, yes.
Transgender people. And people becoming aware that transgender is a thing.
Right.
You know, I mean, maybe people felt transgender before and didn't have a name for it 300 years ago. But now we have, I mean, I walk down the hall sometimes at college and don't know whether my students are male or female. Seriously, do not know and would never ask.
And isn't that beautiful that we can actually like, because this rise of the divine, I've been talking, I have a colleague also that we talk about this a lot. I'm also learning my power structure language in ways that I need to keep working on the deconstruction of my own mind and the way it's been learned. But I feel like we talk a lot about the different types of work that we do and the same type of works that we do and the ways that there is a frontier of healing. Right? And so the people I work with are called to really need to activate this divine feminine and really be healed by this. And really like, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of patriarchy, whatever. You know, also then the next phase of this, the next wave comes when the divine masculine starts to really resonate with this. And we can't just undo the patriarchy from the women only. The men have to also become healed and in balance and understand how to work with that healing. And then beyond that, moving into a whole non-binary representation of what it means to be man or woman, and hold all of these, the diversity of the way this presents. And it's like it's happening all at the same time. Like you said, it's beyond time and space. So we've got like this first wave, and then there's this like the divine masculine that's also healing. And at the same time, we've got this new frontier of the ways that we're opening up beyond, you know, all of it and into this non-binary world. And yeah, Linda, I think that that's really right on everything that you've been saying so far. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead and take any side road you'd like to go on. Eris has many points to her.
I think there's so many conflicts, it's hard to list them all.
Why is she known as the one that's not far from being violent? She's considered more violent. She's considered more violent than Pluto. Why is that?
Well, I think that
willing to be violent.
Well, I think that that's a metaphor for what happens when we're not whole. And when we're not in source, and when we exclude other people, that we create that. That's created by exclusion. It's created by exclusion, or it's created by the fear of having to include people. You know, what we went through in Pittsburgh here last weekend, you know, there's somebody trying to hold on to the power, doesn't want to, you know, wants to blame Jews or doesn't want to include blacks or is afraid of a black president, and they'll cling to that, and it that's what it's created. I mean,
I think there's another side to this. What I'm learning, Pluto is more of, I gave you all the chances I could for the sake of evolution, and now I've got to eradicate you. But Eris is more, I'm willing to be violent to keep up the fight, but it's not about eradication. It's not about removal. It's about progressing through the fight.
Chaos is builds. There's definitely a building, nourishing rebirthing process that happens through chaos. And maybe that's speaking to some of the stuff that you're talking about. Like when all of this stuff is getting torn down, we are also we're rising on at the same time. Like it's the rage, the anger, the voices, the coming together, the community building, the deep levels of compassion, this way that we all need to start connecting on deeper levels is really something that we have to grow and respond as a responsive effort to the chaos that's happening. If all we were doing was destroying and chaotic, then we wouldn't, the world would be looking different. We are simultaneously growing and evolving while we are tearing things down, I think.
Well, there's no doubt. We've been talking about that for the 2 years we've been here, talking about this. One's going down, one's going up. There's no doubt. Trying to sense it.
I think maybe a better translation for discord might be discomfort. I think Eris is at home with being uncomfortable. And that's why no one wants to invite her to the party.
Yeah.
She's look, discomfort is where change happens. Discomfort is where you're going to look at things that you don't like. And guess what? That's never going to go away. I'm never going to go away. You will always have portions of discomfort that are meant to help you grow. And until you acknowledge that, you will stay stuck in whatever role you've picked for yourself, in whatever party you've picked for yourself, in whatever mask, in whatever situation. I find that Rick's question about how are we seeing this in daily life, well, it's everywhere. There's so many places where there's discomfort in every part of my life. It's actually easier to list the places where I'm comfortable rather than where I'm uncomfortable, because there's so many places where the tearing down of the patriarchy is present in my thoughts first, and how I deal with so many areas of the world, and then just trying to pick through those, tear them apart, restructure. That's all re-knitting my frame of reference, and then trying to put it out on the world and rebuild the world we're living in. That takes a lot more people to build that together. But to cast the vision myself, just in tearing down those ingrained patriarchal thoughts and conditioning, is a lot of discomfort. And when you are real, and when you are talking about how uncomfortable you are, you bring up a lot of people that they don't want you around. They don't want to invite you to the party.
There's a campaign ad for a group of women. You might have seen it running on the Democratic ticket. And they are fighter pilots. One's a CIA officer, another's a naval officer. I mean, these are women probably in their 40s, late 30s, early 40s. They're not really young, but they're not my age either. And the commercial has them speaking a little at a time, so they're sort of finishing each other's sentences. But it's so powerful that, they just decide that here we are, and we're going to continue to serve. They don't talk about, they say, we've been serving our country all along. We're going to continue to serve, but we're going to serve in this. We want to serve in the legislature. And I just thought to myself, there's probably people in this country who are apoplectic at the thought of these women, because they were so powerful in a quiet sort of way. I mean, they weren't all, I'm a fighter pilot, but they're the generation of women who've been knocking against these barriers, but they're so comfortable in themselves, and they have no problem putting themselves out there and saying, this is what I want, so I think that when we see it in everyday life, I think it's in our political world, it's in our personal world, it's pretty much everywhere.
I think one thing also, yes, it's everywhere. And the Me Too movement being just that the examples, I think, are so, when you're putting it out there and you're taking the mask off, that it's such a deeply empowering thing to do, that it's kind of this mirror reflection of what is possible for me if this is possible for somebody else. It's that removal of the mask really allows women to come forward with truth and speak truth and you know, like it wasn't just the Me Too movement, but it was the one that happened after the Christine Blasey Ford, why she didn't come forward, that hashtag, why I didn't come forward at the time, you know. And I think that in those stories, when you go through those hashtags and you read the stories of those women, there's so many ways that you could see the suppression of truth, but also really so many stories were coming out decades later and just saying like, but this is just what we did. You know, this is just how it was. We were wearing the mask. We were all thought that this was fine. And I think that when we look at, you know, the evolution now of what we consider fine, like when we look at like the word date rape didn't even exist back when I was experiencing my own sexual trauma, right? So I didn't even know how to come forward. Date rape is a whole new concept here that exists for a new generation. Consent. The idea of discussing consent is something that's happening in levels that are so amazing now that teenagers, and I mean, while there's a lot of, you know, reasons why, you know, there's a lot of other things that are happening, but, you know, sexually among teenage, whatever the generation, but I feel like it's the whole fact that the topic is discussed as much as it is such a deeply empowering thing right now. And it breaks down conversations that have never even been had before. So that's another, you know, discussion.
Well, that was a good point Erica just made. What are the men going to do?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. What are the men going to do?
I think it's important to recognize that for men that are truly involved in the healing process and are truly willing to move forward with deconstructing the patriarchy, because patriarchy hurts men too. Any system that does not allow you to fully live in a power that allows all power to exist within all individuals hurts everybody. If you are not in power, if the only reason why you have your power is by suppressing another individual, you have spiritually inherently now lost your power and you are holding it from a false sense. And so when you can admit that that is part of why you have your power in the first place, and you're willing now to deconstruct the places that you have taken up too much space.
Where are the men going to get their role models?
There are a lot of role models out there that are already working on this. And I think that it's leading edge stuff right now. I mean, it's leading edge work to find them and to keep working with them. I mean,
from inside themselves, of course, but change usually starts from an outer trigger. Where are they going to get it? Are they learning from? I mean, Pluto did its job from 2008 until now. It did the job of destroying anybody that was thinking about codependency. Codependency has been wiped out. Mm-hmm. People are still holding on to it, but it leads to dark alleys. Mm-hmm. The current administration is not going to come forward with an attitude of, like I've written about, the answer with these borders is to be open, not to be closed. It's a feminine attitude. The answer is to be vulnerable, not invulnerable. Where is that change going to come? It's not going to come with one of these studs in one of their movies. The Rock studying in his movie. Is it coming from, Eliza just said, the new Tom Hanks movie about Mr. Rogers? Good answer. Very good answer. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts, ladies? Let's just go ahead and open this discussion up. I'm going to keep it. It's 9:02, and I'm going to keep the tape recording for tomorrow. Let's open. Anybody would like to ask a question or make a short comment, but I want to share amongst everybody. Go ahead.
I have something to add here. The way I'm thinking about, and thank you first of all, ladies, you guys are just wonderful with your insights, amazing, right on time. I had a hypnosis session with Stephen Poplin, and it was amazing. And when I was in my higher self, I came up with some insights that I generally don't think about, but it was really cool. And so I was thinking the apple, you know, when the woman or Eve handed over the apple to Adam, she gave her power away. That's what that symbol means to me. She gave her power away. And now the dark mother, what we're seeing as a dark mother, which I think is kind of floating around, not really being defined at this point, is to me the darkness remover. The mother, the feminine energy that has to remove the darkness from the male, that the males have created. Under hypnosis, Stephen asked me, or my higher self, why I had such a traumatic, why I chose so many lifetimes of trauma. And my higher self said to him, it was because the feminine had to be strengthened. The feminine had to be really, really strong in order to take over now. So I thought that was really profound, you know. And the archetypal images that came through, I was a warrior princess in the Viking age, and I was fighting all these Vikings, these big burly males, and I got killed. But now I remember that spirit that was inside of me, that fighting spirit, and I think that's what Eris represents. It's like, I'm gonna punch you in the face if you just, you know, like if you do one more thing. And I had forgotten that, you know, like if I look at myself as a representation of the whole, I had forgotten that. It was, my light was diminished and diminished and diminished and diminished. And the hypnosis brought that up. And I think that's how women have to feel, like unexcusable, you know, just go for it and do what is necessary at this time.
I think that's really, really good. Thank you. Suzanne, we're taking turn. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, real quick, Elke, you're cracking me up because I have a problem with sucker punching people. So I have to neutralize myself. And I just want to make a few comments. I'm from the era of Barbara Walker. Have you ever heard that author? Barbara Walker? She's wrote an anthology of the feminine in history. And she was not well received in the late 70s, early 80s. But anyway, look her up, Barbara Walker. And I didn't hear central in this discussion about the gods, the goddesses, and Eris, that from my framework, how I live my life, all of those goddesses and gods are within us. We are simply learning how to work with them. They are our inner selves. And I do very much connect with Eris in the fighter capacity. And I'm having a hysterical time connecting with Mary McLeod Trump. She has taught me, and Rick can testify, the F-bombs have stopped on Facebook. And, you know, I'm learning how to balance my anger with Mary. I'm a medium, so I connect with her. The last thing she said on the live stream was when Trump make things abstract, like the transgenders are becoming no identity with this new law, the brown, the black people, they're abstract, they're all bad, they're not personal. So what Mary taught me was when the government or Trump make things abstract, we can make it personal. Go make a friend with somebody that you don't know much about, a transgendered person. If you don't have a lot of mixed cultures in your neighborhood, go and make it personal. They'll make it abstract to separate us. Push yourself to make it personal. And I just wanted to share the feminine in Trump is possible for him to recognize it. But if he can't do that because he can't feel vulnerable. He almost lost his mother when he was 2 years old and she almost died. And I don't want to psychoanalyze Trump, but Trump is one of the people in our world that is pushing this movement for that birth because we're fighting against it. And she's teaching me, no, don't fight against it. Don't get angry. That creates more anger. just try to understand it and move forward in a peaceful manner. And I just wanted to share that.
That's very, very well said. I'm anxious to thank you. I'm anxious to hear from Karen DeBerry because of Karen's long history as a complete energy healer. I'm interested mainly in how what you see intermixes with what Alicia has been finding, being healers in two different parts of the country.
I see, I guess the perspective I have is that I see more men being open to a different type of healing. They are starting to realize medically, I see them turning their backs on established medicine and reaching for a better way of achieving this. I have had numerous encounters in the past 6 to 9 months with people who would be the last men in the world you'd ever think would look for a different type of healing. And the thing that I also I have hurt physically for women who have been not necessarily not believed sexually, but who have been discounted by other women. There's no, just because I'm a woman with this perspective and you're a woman with this perspective, doesn't make me more important than you or you more important than me. And until women can reach out to each other and embrace each other and quit putting their thumb on them and saying, you're bad because you don't understand what I'm trying to tell you, because that's not love. And if we are not going to change things unless it's through reaching out in love, because love and concern. And I see with Eris, I see a woman who was ostracized, who was totally put out of where she should have been, because what was she? She was honest. She may have been honestly wrong in some of what she believed, but she was honest. And it's real easy to say, well, I can't accept what you believe, so consequently, and I feel for her. As a woman, I hurt for this woman who was standing outside, not invited to this huge party.
When you watch Dr. Blasey Ford appear to get beat and appear to withdraw into the shadows, and you could feel her scorpionic strength even beside herself, couldn't you feel a dent? Something happened to the national psyche. Something happened then to the psyche. It appeared that the men won, but they didn't.
But the other side to that is there is a woman, and I don't even know what state she's in. It's a northern or midwestern state, who had the crap beat out of her by a Democrat who's running for attorney general in that state, and she can't get any kind of justice. And see, until we think, okay, Christine Blasey Ford is important, but so is this other woman, and they're equally important. And it doesn't matter who. And that's what I'm talking about. We have to come together as women,
right,
and quit saying.
But what did you sense, Karen, when you sensed that whole issue kind of put to bed and suppressed? What did you all sense as females? What did you all sense rise in you?
I didn't disbelieve her. I believe in my gut that something happened, but I'm not sure that her recall is accurate.
That's not what I'm not talking about whether she was or not. She was symbolic. She was symbolic whether she was or not. She was symbolic of a moment that I felt Eris take a major step forward. And I don't think we're used to seeing it, and it's relatively new to us, but Eris ain't stepping back. That's what I'm saying.
It got a lot of people on the edge of their seats. It called forth because her story was so familiar. It was so common. It was, like I said, just what happened. And people had that exact same story that I feel like it got everybody on the edge of their seat. And Eris was now allowed to be front and center, talking about what sexual assault was, talking about rape from a different perspective. And then that it was a whole new hashtag, just like Me Too, that came out that said why I didn't come forward. I forget what it was now, me talking about it being a monumental hashtag. But I really think that the part of the reason when you're seeing women take down other women, and when you're seeing this separation and this divide of women against women, then that is yet another example of what patriarchy does. It is a divide and conquer power system. And you divide the women. 50% of the women voted for Trump. And it was because, what?
Gaslighting.
Yes, it's gaslighting. And when you're having people not able to come together or pointing fingers at the aisles, that the woman that is not believing the other woman, or the woman that is taking down the other woman, or the woman that is supporting Trump, who is obviously the patriarchy in so many ways personified, but when the women are supporting that is a version of internalized misogyny. And it is they have in some way now identified their power, their worth, their value through the structure that gave it to them. And it's not saying there's any fault in that. It's all these women we've all been part of the system and all been duped to believe that this was the way to go. And the problem is that some of them still really, really, really believe it and haven't found another way. And that's, I think, what Eris is asking us to do is if we can take down that structure and then go deep, deep, deep within us. It's not just men that need to heal the patriarchy, and it's not just strong women. It's everybody taking it down from every aspect within themselves.
Well, as you ladies feel Eris come through, men consensus around you. I would think that one sense is the men are saying, well, we need to adjust. I would think another sense is, hey, we can be liberated also. Well, I've been liberated towards women for so long, I don't remember what it's like. But what do you sense the men are picking up from this movement, this Eris movement?
I think there's both a double down and there's people that are really rising up into this call. But there are definitely men that are doubling down on how to bring this about. Just like there is this double down on hate crimes, and because it's the clinging for the structure and for the power.
Go ahead, dear.
But I'm really also seeing a lot of people aware of more, because again, more articles are being shown, more conversations are being had, more women are saying, this was my experience, and asking that conversation to happen.
I can't tell you how many women I've read for that get to the point where they need to it's just obvious they need to get out and speak to other women. There are so many other women who don't want to be drug along, who don't want to take a free ride. They just need a little flick. They just need a little encouragement. They just need a little bit of, you guys are largely feminine leaders here. There are a lot of women who are an inch away from that, and they're hanging on nervously to that thing called security and house and the check and food on the table, and they're willing to let it go now. This has been since 2008. They've been letting go more and more and more and more of it. And I'm seeing so many men who have gotten themselves very securely put into a codependent relationship, and they're in big trouble.
They're freaking out. They're freaking out.
It's okay, because it has to happen. We need to go through it. Speak to that. Karen raised her hand. You go ahead, dear.
It's a real quick question, but it's interesting. We talk about assault from men, but I am not the only person I know who has been assaulted by homosexual women. And I mean, back when I was in high school and I graduated in 67, you darn sure didn't talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, as we talk about this, you have to look at both sides of the coin.
Of course.
I had a little girl when I was in nursing school. I can still see her face. She came to my door. I was the oldest student in my nursing class. And she came to my door, and she was 18 years old and very, very naive. And her heart was broken, and she was just bawling incessantly because we had a homosexual female in our class, and she was stalking this girl, and she was haunting her. I mean, it was just, and to this naive 18-year-old, and this was in the early 80s, she really didn't know what to do with it. And I told her, I said, you tell her to leave you alone, and if she doesn't, you and I together will go to the head, you know, the College of Nursing, and we will get it straight. And so, because I was the only support the girl had, but it just showed me that there is more than one side of the coin. But even today, I'm not sure if you had problems with a homosexual that you could openly talk about it, because it's.
Rick, I think we've got a mindset change, like a whole mindset change with I'm hearing resonances of, you know, duality, the idea of duality. And if you're different than me, then now we've got a competition. And the whole point that Eris is trying to say is, let's respect each other's differences and figure out how to live with the discomfort, because that's the only way we're going to build a multiple.
But where do you think Eris
kind of community is that if I make different choices for my health care, I'm not going to see your choices that are different as threatening to me. I'm going to take my responsibility for my health and let you take your responsibility for yours. And let's harmonize those things.
But astrologically, where did Eris get this from? It's a good question. Where'd she get it from?
Get what from?
This type of leadership inspiration. Where is she picking up on it? Where I think by the fact that we're talking about Eris ruling Libra, we obviously know clearly that Venus rules Libra. I think we're into an age now where we're seeing two-dimensional rulerships. We're seeing Venus ruling Libra and also Eris at some level. We're seeing Mercury ruling Virgo and also Chiron. We're seeing Venus ruling the Earth, or Taurus, but also the Earth. It's kind of like we're evolving into a higher level. Linda, Platt, you get any idea on that? That's a tough question.
I don't. Let me think about that for a second.
I think she gets it from her brother.
Well,
okay, go ahead, Melanie. You get it from Mars? Good answer.
You think about Mars ruling Aries and Eris being discovered in Aries, but she's going to be ruling Libra. I think we've got a yin-yang, masculine, feminine polarity thing going on. And if he's her brother, she's closely tied.
That's a very good point.
They're brother and sister. And one of the problems with Venus is that whatever the archetype isn't identified with the angry side or the self-defensive side. So that maybe the Venus archetype is an incomplete one because it's a really close-in personal planet and it needs help. I don't know.
Naive.
Yeah, in a way, because you have, that sort of iron fist and a velvet glove, because Libra is not a weak sign. It's just limited in its ability.
Venus is always painted as so pleasant. She's the small benefic, and you be with a Libra and you see there are other barbs in there beside Venus going on.
But you notice the lengths she went to win the competition. Hello, Mars. She did.
Can I also, I mean, if you're saying like, where is could it be that if Eris is about this chaos and the deconstruction of all of these power structures as they exist, that leadership is actually something that needs to take on a completely different definition, that it's coming from a more internally sovereign place, that it happens so that there's not even a hierarchical leadership around this.
Now, what can you say about this? In astrology, there are 4 cardinal signs. Libra is the air cardinal, and Libra's primary function is to teach people to think. Eris has to fall into that groove too.
I think it's really asking us to deconstruct our perceptions about what it means to have power structures and leadership. That actually could be, this is when we're talking about being on the outer edge of the galaxy right now, or that our universe is expanding and we're trying to like cut through, that a lot of people that are here birthing new earth kind of concept work and doing this deconstruction, social justice wise or otherwise, we're looking at what does it mean when there's no capitalism? What does it mean when there's no patriarchy? And if we're looking at the patriarchy falling, then what happens is there is a system of liberation that exists because sovereignty is what rules.
Well, in one way, the disappointing thing is the unfortunate thing is we're trying to study Eris while Pluto's doing its thing heavy duty in Capricorn, which has to do with sovereignty and structure too. We're not having the benefit of just seeing Eris by itself. So therefore, we have to watch Eris go through the years. When I go back now to all my natal charts, and now Eris is on there, she's causing an absolute revolution in thousands of my charts. I'm anxious to talk with Karen S. here. Is she with us still? I think she just disappeared. She was just here a second ago. Maybe she didn't. Other thoughts from anybody else that has? Erica, what's on your mind today? What you've been hearing?
Well, I've been making comments when it was the fairest of them all. I thought of the fairy tale that we all grew up with about what's her name, Snow White, and she was given the apple by the witch, and her wicked stepmother was looking in that mirror and saying, "Who is the fairest of them all?" You know, it's like all those different parts of our psyche coming into play. And
very, very, very good. I'm anxious to also hear what our brilliant Aquarian has to say. Rip, you're the first male I'm coming to tonight. What are you finding out in the world, looking through the male perspective on seeing Eris rise?
Fox and Henhouse here. I don't really feel all that comfortable.
Go, Rep.
But I've noticed that I have a T-square to Eris.
That's brand new.
Yeah, it's a pretty tight T-square. Mars, Moon, opposed Saturn.
We'll be looking at that tomorrow.
Yeah, and then
I've got it with
Pluto's
my
also opposed
Jupiter.
Eris, so I might have some kind of weird thing happening that, you know, I'm just like living out a kind of a prison life here. But I guess my thing is, I guess is, you know, like I'm pretty libertarian in a sense. I'm not like in any way like conservative, or, you know, like Kavanaugh I think is, you know, a douche. But I think, you know, I've also spent, you know, I was spending some time talking to a woman who was a gender studies major, and like I spent a lot of time watching like anti-feminist videos. So I've kind of spent a lot of time like trying to piece together what I think an actual balance of what like that kind of proper thing would be. I mean, so I guess my concern with Eris is that I think without like serious, like real, like knowledge of like some kind of data supporting it, that it's, if you jump to conclusions with an archetypal description of it.
That's exactly right. You got to be very careful. And I've been warning about that for weeks. It's just a month now that I put Eris on my charts. Just a month. I very slowly lift up the weight of a new planet, put it on the chart, because it causes a revolution in every way. And I got it myself with Jupiter, same degree, in the third house, in Aries. I understand it, but I have to look at many, many, many more charts. And I do want to continue the discussion. Thank you, Rip. I want to also let you know, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, I guess I just wanted to say, like, having watched a lot of anti-feminist videos, that, like, men are, like, scared.
Yeah, that's okay. It's okay to be scared. That's good.
Like, not necessarily all, like, bad men either. Just, like,
yeah,
real men that don't know.
What's there to be scared of?
You know what I mean? They just don't.
Your woman's going to become more of a woman, more of a person, more of an entity.
So basically, there is a kind of a curve. Like, if you're actually striving to rise to that challenge, that, there's some, like, unforgivingness that is perceived, I think, in the community of people that are involved in, like, that kind of thinking. You know what I mean? They're concerned that, the push might, like, the pendulum might swing too far to one side.
Well, I think it's kind of natural that the pendulum needs to swing that way for quite a while. And I can also say, as an astrologer, for a while, we're going to need to study this planet for a while. We're just going to have to. It's taken me years to learn about Pluto, many, many years. Also want to let you know tonight that before you hightail it out of here, Alicia has offered to lead us through a kind of a guided meditation or affirmation, whatever she wants to call it. I'd like to get your final thoughts tonight from the three of you. Alicia?
Thank you. I think this is a really enlightening conversation. I'm really grateful to have the ability to see it more clearly through the astrological lens and how it plays out in all of these other ways, because and I really like the idea of sitting back and watching and waiting to see, because I think it's actually going to be so much bigger than we are prepared for in a lot of ways.
That's exactly what I'm expecting. Thank you very much. Melody?
The patterns I see between masculine and feminine are internal to me. I personify them through the planets and then internalize them again and recognize that I'm playing most of these parts myself. So to hear that men are afraid, I recognize that men would be afraid, because a lot of what we have built has been, it's either you or me. And so in seeing the feminine rise, continuing that thought process means if they rise, I fall. And what the feminine is really about is receiving and building community and lifting everyone up. But if you don't get it, you don't get it. And opening your mind to some radical idea that's new to you, it's hard to recognize new patterns if you've never held them.
That's beautiful.
I felt that discomfort.
That's beautifully said, and it also points the way to us entering into Pluto, into Aquarius, and the age of Aquarius coming. Thank you, Melody. Linda, Platt?
Well, I think that two things. First of all, I think that just from being in my work with students in literature, that archetypes are really difficult because they're complex and they're cultural. And they evolve.
They change.
They've evolved and changed as the culture evolves and changed. I mean, when I was a kid, one of the other archetypes in the fairy tales that is identified with Eris is Sleeping Beauty, which is a whole other matter. But that was the fairy tale that spoke to me as a child. And I think to myself, well, no wonder. I mean, I was like I was sleeping through life waiting for a man to wake me up. And now I look at that and I don't even know if I could see the movie or I just couldn't do it, because I've outgrown it in a way. And I think that what happens is that I think we're starting to outgrow some stuff. And somebody said this to me this week that, and I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, but pointed to the 11 victims of the shooting in Pittsburgh this weekend as kind of martyrs in a way, because their passing brought about something that I think the country was shocked to see how Pittsburgh responded to this. In Pittsburgh, we're 1 degree of separation from pretty much everybody. I mean, I know a lot of people who knew somebody who was killed. I didn't know anybody, but I know people who knew them. And so when people came out and our president decides to come, and people were very angry about that, but what they did was they came together as a community. It wasn't like one person throwing a tomato at Trump. It was people saying, this is not acceptable to us. And it's just not acceptable. You know, you're not acceptable. Your behavior is not acceptable. And it's not like he didn't get to come and he didn't get to put the rocks on the stones on the thing, but that nobody wanted to have anything to say to him because what he has to say is not acceptable. It's not like he was not, we didn't want him to come to the party, but he came anyway, so we let him come. And then we said, but this isn't how we behave here. And I think that that's the beginning of a way to start moving forward, that men, I mean, I imagine the Christine Blasey Ford thing. What if it had been different? What if Kavanaugh had said, I don't remember doing this. I was a drunk. I was a kid that acted out badly. I probably treated women really terribly. And I want to apologize to you that happened. Well, then that would have been a completely different moment. But he's busy protecting things. And what so many women said to me, well, what if this happened to my son? And I want to say, I know males who have been falsely accused. It's very terrible. It's a terrible thing. But it's also a terrible thing to be assaulted. And those are not mutually exclusive things. And we should be able to talk about how that feels and talk about things on both sides. But we can't do it from a position of defensiveness and exclusion. We're not going to believe you. You know, we're going to let you speak, but we're really silencing you. Even as your mouth is moving, we're negating you. And I think that this weekend showed me something that was not that. And, you know, we're having a lot of iconic moments right now where we're going to look back on these things. We're going to go, oh, that's what that meant. And I think Eris is part of that energy.
Well, I have to tell you, I can't tell you how much I appreciate all of you, especially our guests tonight, Linda, Alicia, and Melody. We could go on forever. But the point is, it's not just you three, it's all of you. And I appreciate this group, and we're working together, and I think the group knows that, and that's why we're relatively small, but we're in our 104th week. And we're helping, we're being seeds distributed around, we're helping the dialogue. I don't know what to say. There's so much going on so many levels, but I want to thank all of you for keep putting your heart into this each week. It means a lot to me. And my three special guests tonight, you're certainly invited back anytime you wish. We really enjoyed it. And Alicia, I'd like to turn the ending over to you because I know you had something you would like to lead us through as a group.
Thank you, Rick. Yeah, it was just typically the way when I'm working with groups, it really feels nice to be able to kind of take all of the thoughts that we conjure and that we think about and the ways that we open our minds, and that we can also begin to internalize that a little bit more to create the change that we're all here for, because I really believe that everyone here is here as a change maker, and that we're all kind of sorting things out on a leading edge and trying to figure that out. So if you just want to take some deep breaths and kind of acknowledging for a moment, this group, everybody here that is joining now and those that will be joining later, even with the recording as this goes out into the world, just taking a moment to connect to that energy that's been created and really beginning to bring your awareness into your own body now. Some deep breaths and feeling yourself grounding in. So after being in the mind and in all of the very logical places and allowing ourselves to kind of expand and grow in this new way today, as we are out spinning on the edge of our universe and discovering the unknown, bringing all of that awareness now back into the body. And taking a moment to begin to open yourself with a commitment, perhaps, if you're ready today, to acknowledge this new change that's coming and to be a change maker within it. To open yourself to deconstructing any of the fallacies, any of the veils that have helped you stay hidden or blind to what you need to see in your own life, in your community, in the world. And doing this with a pure heart, knowing that it is here as an offering for the sake of our survival. That as we begin to dissolve our own individual structure, that we are here to contribute to the collective and see it shift and grow, unfolding in new beautiful patterns that support new life, thriving, joy, love, harmony. Whatever is coming on the other side of this chaos, we welcome it. We invite it in. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody very much. And Alicia sends you a special hug all the way to New Orleans. Come see us. Love you all. See you next week.
Love you all. Thanks for everybody.